rowing is already here. How can we increase the number of people who are going to be able to participate in this sport? How can we invest in these female athletes and make it so that there are opportunities for them to compete at the national level? And that's what I think is just really exciting about that continued development, and that those athletes are now, the high school athletes that are in that lightweight range, it increases the number of opportunities that they have to compete in college. And certainly as a lightweight rower, there are opportunities on the open weight level, but it's different to be able to go to a lightweight school and compete at a national championship or compete for a national championship versus, kind of trying to fight your way through as a 128-pound athlete in a team full of athletes who are maybe 6 feet tall. There's a little bit of a difference there. And so having that opening and having these new programs develop is really exciting.
Let's dive in. So for everyone listening, we have Mary Foster here, head coach, women's rowing at Boston University for the lightweight program. Very excited to talk to Mary. We are, as I was explaining to Mary before, we are long overdue for someone who is actively coaching in the women's lightweight space at a very competitive Division I program. And I've talked to athletes, dozens of athletes in the past who are looking to row at the lightweight level on the women's side. And again, this is long overdue to have someone like Mary on, and I'm excited to dive in. And with that, Mary, I want to kick things off, right? We're going to talk about a lot of topics: lightweight rowing, recruiting for programs like yourself, what it takes to be successful at that level. But before we get there, you're up in Boston. It's early March, and after a cold winter. Talk about the outlook, for the next few weeks. Are things on the Charles starting to thaw out? Are you going to be getting on the water anytime soon? Are you guys on the ergs? How's winter progressing? Just give a general outlook on the start to 2026 and what's to come here in the next few weeks. Let's kick things off there.
Yeah, we've had a great winter training season, and it has been chilly. We've had a couple blizzards, a couple of snow days, so it's been exciting for the athletes. But the river's starting to thaw a little bit. We're starting to get launches back in the water. Actually, 1 week from today, we head down for our spring break training trip to Clemson. So we'll be on a flight. I think we'll have landed by now, a week from now. So we're excited to get back on the water down there, and we always keep our fingers crossed that the water's clear by the time we get back to Boston. So that training trip really gives us an opportunity to get out on the water every single day, multiple times a day, without worrying about the weather. And then hopefully when we get back, we'll be able to just jump right back in and then get into our racing season.
And so actually, when this comes out, you guys will basically be, in Clemson. You say Clemson, right? Okay. And
Yeah.
what does that look like in terms of like how long will you guys be down there? Like, what's the main when you guys are down there? I love teams that do are able to get away and kind of break up their off season, get away and get some strokes on the water, especially when you're up in the Northeast. What's the focus of that training trip? How many days will you guys be away? Like, is it all going to be on the water? Presumably first strokes on the water. Like, what's the main focus of a trip like that?
Yeah, this year will be our first strokes on the water, we think. Last year we had about 1,000 meters of water right in front of the boathouse before we left. So we got out there to try to get the athletes' hands used to the oars again after being on the erg. But this year, I think it'll be our first strokes. We'll be there Monday through Saturday of this year during spring break. So no class, which is really great. So it gives us the opportunity to just focus on rowing and, again, get out multiple times a day. So usually we think of it as it's a training trip. It's a little bit of a selection trip, but really just getting back on the water and getting in as many strokes as we can. And with no class, it does allow for that focus to really not think about, I have to rush off to class, or I can't take a nap today. So the athletes really get to both spend their time thinking about rowing, but also bonding with each other. We're all staying in the same hotel, eating in dining halls. So it's definitely a good time for us to be able to focus on the rowing in a way that is a little bit harder once we get back. We also jump into racing so quickly and race almost every weekend from, I think, March 21st or 23rd. It'll be a Saturday for us that we start racing season, and race almost every weekend through the beginning of May. So having a week where we're on the water and just can get multiple sessions in and start our selection process. We continue that through the season, but the start of it is always helpful to have that focus week.
And I guess so yeah. So I guess if you're leaving the second week of March, then that means if you're away for a week and you're returning, you said late March is when you guys kick off racing. So you kind of have to have that little bit of a selection edge down at this trip. It's not like, you kind of have to. It's not purely training. It's also starting to kind of turn up the heat a little bit in the sense of kind of getting lineups figured out and things like that. And then you said late March is when you guys kick things off. Where's that race at? Or mid March? Where's that race at? What's that look like?
Yeah, so our first race of the season this year will be against Boston College. So actually, they're actually in Clemson right now as we speak. So their spring break is usually a week before ours. So they're training down there. They'll come back, and then we race them for that first race of the season. And they're an open weight team, and we're a lightweight team. So it was really born out of both coaching connections and convenience, where we are both on the same river. And so if the river is giving us trouble in terms of ice when we have that early season race, neither of us has traveled in order to make it happen. So we kick off the racing season against them. The other thing that happens with that part of the racing season is when we race an open weight team, we generally race in the open weight format. So we'll race against them in a varsity 8, a second varsity 8, and at least a varsity 4. And then beyond that, we'll see how many athletes we both have and what events we want to put out on the water. But that's a little bit different for us than when we race against lightweight competition, or when we're racing, at our season championship and at our national championship, where we race an 8, a 4, and a double. So it gives us a little bit of a different start to the season. And so when we talk about the selection piece of things, we don't need to have everything sorted out. We just get a loose idea of what we have. So it's actually a nice way for us to be able to start the season like that.
And that's actually going to piggy or kind of take us into a little bit of our conversation today, which I'm excited about. But just with lightweight rowing, the format of it, like you just highlighted, the fact that you guys actually have, the breakdown of an 8, a 4, and actually sculling right with the double, which is unique relative to the other divisions within rowing, the other leagues within rowing. And before we get to that, I want kick things off. Like you've been in this space for a long time. You are in your third season, third year at Boston. Prior to that, you spent a number of years at Harvard on the lightweight side, Harvard Radcliffe on the lightweight side. You rode lightweight yourself. I'm just talk a little bit about your start to rowing and your introduction to coaching, and then obviously just a little bit about the trajectory now leading the charge at Boston, and the lightweight rowing as a whole. Like you've been in that space for a long time, and your experience as an athlete. Just talk about your start to rowing and all the way to where you are today.
Yeah. That's a long, I guess, 20 plus year story. So I'll do my best. But so I was a swimmer in middle school. And then eventually, my mom talked to one of the other swimming moms, and their other daughter rowed. And so my mom thought, well, maybe this is something you could try and see if you like it. So I actually did, my first strokes were on the Charles at CRI with a Learn to Row program. So I think that was my sophomore year of high school. And I liked it. And it was something that I was completely unfamiliar with. And I also liked it because other people were new to it. I think one of the things that's great about rowing is that you can learn to do it in high school, you can learn to do it in college, you can learn to do it beyond college, and other people are learning alongside you. And swimming, when I was in middle school, I was swimming with kids that were much younger than me because I hadn't started super young, and I wasn't so fast that I was swimming with kids my age. So there were some kids my age, but a lot of it, there were 10-year-olds. And I actually swam with some people that went on to be Olympians, but they were much younger than me and much faster than me. So when I got into rowing, I was like, oh, this is something where I'm learning alongside other people and I'm gaining these skills. And that was a lot of fun to be able to be with my peers and to be able to feel like I was learning something instead of just doing something like when I was swimming. So that's where it started. And then after the Learn to Row, did a season of novice rowing at CRI. And that was so much fun. And that was really where that camaraderie first started for me, of getting in a boat together with 8 people and going to a race and all having almost no idea how things were going to go. And just having coaches that were so invested in us learning how to do this thing and learning how to work hard and learning how to work together and problem solve. That was so fun for me. And so after that novice season, I went into varsity, and Ethan Curran, who, legendary coach that so many people love, was one of my coaches, was really the head coach of the varsity girls program. And so I still see him when we go down to Clemson. We'll run into each other at the course, and it's always so great to kind of have that throwback to see him again. But that was again where I kept learning like what the sport was all about and how to work hard and apply myself and face those challenges of like, wow, I have this 2K and I'm really nervous and I don't want to do it, and I'm going to have to do it anyway. And so that was really my introduction to rowing in general. And then with lightweight rowing, that was when lightweight rowing was still an event at youth nationals and at our regional championships. So it's no longer structured that way. But when I was there, I remember, kind of building my way up through varsity and starting to get my footing. And then there was one day that I was out with athletes that I hadn't really rowed with before, and I was like, "Oh, I think I've moved up. I think I'm at the next level." And after that practice, one of the athletes approached me and she was like, "Are you a lightweight?" And I realized that I'd been out in a boat of mostly lightweight varsity rowers, and I was so flattered that she was interested in rowing with me and was hoping that I was going to be able to be a lightweight with them. So that was really, I actually didn't know how to answer her question. I was like, I think I'm a lightweight. I'm not sure, but I just kept moving through that spring season and did end up racing lightweight that season. So that was a fun kind of foray into something that was totally new to me, and to have an athlete that was older and more experienced to say like, hey, like I think you're good, and I hope that I'm able to row with you, was just something that was a really cool experience. So um, beyond
And you,
that,
yeah, you
oh, go
bridge
ahead.
that into, right. So yeah, you bridge that into then, obviously getting your feet into it and or getting kind of like your start to it. Former swimmer, rowing or rowing now, starting to get your feet wet. Where did that transition to? Then okay, like getting recruited and rowing in college. Like, what did that look like for you?
That was another one where I was like, I'm not sure. Am I good enough to get recruited? Is this something that I can do in college? Am I good enough to row in college? So that process, at least, 20-ish years ago now, wasn't quite as accelerated as it is nowadays. And so when I was in my junior year, that's when I was kind of thinking about, okay, do I want to do this in college? What is that even like? And so towards the end of my junior year, I was thinking pretty seriously about, okay, maybe I want to run college, but now that seems the timelines are so, so much more accelerated. I was basically kind of a year behind where an athlete would be right now. But I decided that I thought I might want to row in college, and it was really a college fair during summer nationals, I think in 2006. So between my junior and senior year of college, that I had the opportunity to go to that college fair and see coaches in person and kind of learn a little bit more about what it was about. And that's actually when I got my first exposure to Loyola Marymount University, which is where I ended up going. So I met the coaches at that college fair, and I hadn't heard of the school before. My mom grew up in Los Angeles, so she had heard of the school, and they had lightweight rowing as one of the things that they really were invested in recruiting lightweight rowers and racing in lightweight events. So that really, I went through the recruiting process with them and with a few other schools, and ended up committing to them. And then that's kind of what drew me out to California for my college rowing career.
And so you kind of like really have been, again, like lightweight rowing actually has been really part of the fabric of your story for since and really your first strokes. Like you kind of went in with the intent of rowing at the college level as a lightweight. I know that you bridged that into training after school and after college and continuing your career there. Like talk about like okay, finishing up at the college level, then like I guess your first exposure to the coaching world at the lightweight level or just in general was I guess volunteering back home actually right back up in Boston at Harvard Radcliffe. Like talk about that and like actually finding it and like where did the passion for coaching come in and then obviously with the abundance of college programs out there, why was lightweight rowing in Boston something that kind of like drew you in?
Yeah. So I think as I'm telling these stories, it sounds like I kind of tripped and fell into everything that happened. I'm a believer in right place, right time, but you have to get yourself in the right place at the right time. So I think that's really how I ended up kind of stepping into the coaching world. But before that, I finished up college, moved back to Boston in order to go to grad school, and realized that my grad school schedule didn't fit with the women's sweep schedule at Riverside, which is I had done their summer programs when I was in college, and I was going to continue rowing casually on the side, and realized with the schedule not working that I wanted to continue rowing, but I wasn't sure how. And I knew that the high performance group at Riverside trained in the mornings and that would fit with my schedule. So it wasn't necessarily the pursuit of making the national team or the pursuit of elite rowing that led me there. It was really the schedule. And I reached out to the coach and I said, "Hey, I'm interested in continuing to row and I like to work hard. And what do you think?" And he had seen some of my rowing when I was doing the summer program, and he said, "Sure, let's go." I was just really a sweep rower, and that was really my step into sculling because at the elite level for lightweight women, sculling is it. There really weren't. Well, they added the pair later, unfortunately, after my time, but sculling was something that I had to learn to do. So all of my rowing had really been sweep through college, and then it was like, okay, here's a person who will lend you a single, and we're going to go do this. So there was another very steep learning curve at the beginning of that. So I ended up training at Riverside for about 5 years with the HPG. And that was, wow, so challenging, but certainly one of the best experiences of my life. Just the place, the people, and then how it's shot me into this career in coaching. So it was really, that step into coaching. I had done a little bit of when I was on the recreational swim team, coaching a lane. There was a head coach, and I was like probably 13 years old telling 10-year-olds what to do. But that's something that I think I had dabbled in without realizing it. And then when there were opportunities to coach learn to row programs at CRI where I had been and where I had been one of those athletes in those programs, I just jumped at those opportunities. And then eventually, so it must have been, I think it was the fall of 2015, when Sarah Schwagman at the time, now Sarah Baker, became the head coach for the Harvard Radcliffe Lightweights. I saw her at the boathouse one day, and she had been on the high performance group with me. I saw her at the boathouse, and I was like, what is she doing here?" She's like the head coach for the Harvard Radcliffe Lightweights. Like, I wonder if I could do that someday. And she approached me and she was like, "Are you interested in volunteer coaching?" So shout out Sarah for that, because we're very close friends now. And like that was really the opportunity of a lifetime. So I just jumped into there, and again learned a lot really quickly. And that was really, yeah, the beginning of really thinking about seriously coaching as a career versus just coaching learn to row during the summer.
That's oh, I love that. And again, just kind of falling into or finding those opportunities, putting yourself in a position to um, get those opportunities, right? Or have people, again, like fall in, I think that's those are good lessons for anyone. I think as we dive in here, I think let's just again, as I said right in the beginning, lightweight rowing, head coach, competitive Division I program. I was looking at the results earlier today of the IRA and head of Charles and all these different things. Like it's just so competitive at that level. And as I take a step back, it's one of the things that I think a lot of athletes, parents, high school coaches who are listening right now can learn a little bit more about. Is this actually a worthwhile pursuit for my son, or my in this instance my daughter, and or my athlete who is maybe on the smaller side and they want to row and they have the grades and they can get into a school that is very academically rigorous but also has Division I rowing and in a space where they can thrive. Just but behind that, lightweight rowing is also very different than say like open weight, especially at the end, with the Division I NCAA open weight category.
Right.
Unpack that just from a high level for people who are brand new, and parents who are listening. Like, what does lightweight rowing at the Division I level for women's rowing? What does that look like? And you highlighted the boat categories, and obviously there's a weight limit, the weight structure in order to be qualify for to be able to compete. The difference between the IRA and the NCAA. Like if I was brand new and I'm a parent who, is curious about this as a path for my daughter, just how would you kind of from the surface level or from the high level break that down?
Yeah, I feel like I could talk about it all day. But really, I think that uh, at the most, kind of the one of the key components, obviously, is the weight of the athlete. So for lightweight women, the weight for racing is 130 pounds. And so that's something seems simple, but it can be confusing just because with men's lightweight rowing in college, they average the weights of the athletes in order to, there's a maximum weight and there's an average weight, and they have to hit those. And at the international level with lightweight women, there's an average weight, right? And that's 57 kilos. No, sorry. Yeah. 57 is the average, and then 59 is the max. And so when people think about college lightweight rowing for women, they're like, what is the actual weight? What do I actually need to do? And so really for us, when we do a lightweight rowing race, when we race either let's say we're at the national championship, the weigh-in is the day before we race. So after 3 p.m. the day before we race, each of the athletes that is going to race needs to be at or under 130 pounds. And then the racing happens the following day. So that's another difference where, it used to be when I was at youth nationals, the weigh-in, you had between 2 hours before your race and 1 hour before your race to weigh in, and then you raced. So the timeline was much quicker in terms of that weigh-in to racing timeline. So at the collegiate women's level, at the IRA, at all of the lightweight races that we do, it's after 3 p.m. the day before we're actually racing. So when I think about an athlete that is interested in lightweight rowing or is interested in being recruited to be a lightweight in college, we really, in the recruiting process, target athletes who are right around that 130-pound weight limit or less than that, right? So there's nothing to say that a 120-pound athlete can't be really successful as a lightweight rower. Certainly, we know from open weight rowing that height and weight can be an advantage. But then with lightweight rowing, we're really looking for athletes who are going to be able to be boat movers and be really efficient. And so that around 130 pounds, and then really any athlete that can be moving a boat are athletes that we're looking at targeting for recruitment. So that's really, kind of in terms of like the person who does the rowing. That's kind of the structure. And then for us, like we mentioned, our national championship is an 8, a 4, and then a double. So we do have sculling involved. So that's something that's so different now than it was when I was in high school. The sculling programs have really exploded across the country in the US. And I think there has been a push from US rowing at that high level to try to get athletes who are experienced in sculling in order to kind of, improve world championship medal potential and Olympic medal potential. But that's really taken root in these youth programs, and even things like Head of the Charles. The Cox Quad at Head of the Charles didn't exist when I was in high school. I don't even. Maybe it's 10 years old. I'm taking a guess there in terms of how many years it's been in Head of the Charles. But that's really driven, and the Canadians were winning it initially, right? When they first introduced the quad, to Head of the Charles. It was really Canadian high school programs that would come down and win it. And then now the US sculling programs have really stepped in and stepped up. And so that's something where programs that are more sculling focused and do have athletes that maybe have potential as lightweights, like that's a really great opportunity for them to be recruited to college. And certainly they can be recruited to open weight programs as well if they have the speed, but we actually race in those sculling categories. So that's something that as having done the sculling when I was in the high performance group, that's something that I also really like about being able to coach lightweight rowing, is that these athletes are able to learn a life skill or develop a life skill where they can go row a single after college in their 50s, 60s. We have so many master's programs on the river and master's rowers on the Charles. So that sculling component is something that I really value.
I think, like, again, like you, I mean, that was a great breakdown of it, and we're gonna kind of tailor the second half of our conversation around the athletes specifically. Like, again, like what makes an athlete successful, at that level, and what do you look for as a coach? And obviously, you have to, no pun intended, but weigh in like the factors of the size of the athlete, their weight, and can they make that for and all these different things, which I think is an added challenge to the recruiting process and all these different things. Before we even get to that, two questions that I'm curious about. Like, obviously, lightweight rowing is housed at the championship level under the IRA. And I was a Division I college men's coach for my entire career. I know the IRA quite well. I know the regatta and all these different things. Like, talk about that. Being different from, say, like the NCAA championship at the Division I level, Division II level, Division III level. The inclusion of lightweight rowing in the IRA. Also, I'm curious to hear from you about the schools that are involved in this, because I think that's one of the unique things with lightweight rowing. Like, I think, and it's actually growing as far as I can tell. I think over the next few years, like, you're going to add in, I think, my good friend Delaney out of Eastern Michigan, they're adding a lightweight program. And I think the other one is, who is a Sacred Heart, I think, is adding, right? So the growth of it within lightweight rowing and the IRA and all these different things, like, talk about that as kind of again, just broad base, like, just for people who are looking and they are, it's late May, early June, and they're like, well, I want to see how, Boston University is doing at the national championship. Well, it's not going to be NCAA. It's actually going to be over here in the IRA with the top of the top on the men's side. Talk about that if you don't mind.
Yeah, not at all. I think it helps to go back to, I guess, like the 80s, I suppose, so there were national championships that occurred that had open weight women and lightweight women together. And that was before women's rowing became a sponsored NCAA sport. So that happened. I can't give you the exact year, unfortunately, in my mind. But in the 90s, that's when open weight women's rowing became an NCAA sponsored sport. They developed the NCAA national championship for open weight women's rowing. And that's when the lightweights didn't have a national championship anymore. So that's where, it helps to understand that open weight women's rowing, out of the 4 types of rowing, open women, open men, light women, that open weight women are the only ones that are like an NCAA, sponsored national championship. So for the lightweight women, when there was nowhere to go, the IRA already existed for the men and the lightweight men. And so the lightweight women were able to really join the IRA and be able to become a part of a national championship and have their national championship hosted within the IRA. So that has continued since then. So we, instead of, so at usually often the championship is the same weekend. So that also adds to sometimes the confusion. So the NCAA, when they're having their championship, they've got their eight and four. I always go to back to our format. They have the varsity eight, the second varsity eight, and then their four. And they're competing. And then they have the D1, D2, and D3 championship all together. And then we're off with the openweight men and the lightweight men, competing always at a different location. We'll be in Sacramento this year. Very luckily, I'm excited about that. So that's a different location, different national championship. So it definitely is a confusing system, and then can also be daunting to be a part of a system where there are not a million lightweight women's schools. And so we definitely are a small group of coaches that we all know each other too. All know each other and all communicate with each other. So when we're at the IRA National Championship, there are a lot of men around, a lot of very tall open weight men and lightweight men. But we've really been grateful to be able to be a part of that championship, and have a national championship continue that isn't just, the 7, 8, 9 teams of lightweights that are together. So.
And just again, bridging off of that, just out of my own curiosity, like what do you think is the spark? That again, when you think about adding programs and stuff like that, with a couple other programs coming in, is that something that you think is like fueled by almost, supply demand on the recruiting side of like more athletes are, kind of wanting to row at the Division I level, and things are competitive, and you have, especially with, I think in the lightweight women's space, you only have the however many schools, and a lot of those schools are incredibly, top end rowing schools, but also very academically rigorous. Like Boston University in and of itself is a very hard school to get into. And you have to be also a top tier student. But also you have a lot of athletes at the high school level. You talked about the growth of sculling at the high school level. So maybe that's an avenue that athletes are exploring. That's, hey, I could go to college and actually, potentially win a national championship in a sculling event, which I did all through high school. Like, what do you think is sparking the positive growth of lightweight rowing at the college level, which I think is a positive, just providing more opportunities for, younger athletes who, want to row for competitive program. So what do you, again, take that wherever you want, but yeah, I'm curious to hear from you.
Yeah. I think, it's definitely evolved. I think that's, I guess I think back to my experience in college. There were more programs that would have lightweights as a part of their larger open weight program and then compete in lightweight events, either at it was WIRA for us. When I was in college, we would compete in the lightweight 8, the lightweight 4, and try to qualify for IRAs, but we weren't specifically a lightweight team. We were just part of the open weight team. And in that era, there were many more teams that did that. And then that started to change a little bit with, I think, and these are my thoughts and theories, but I think part of the impact was having the automatic qualifiers for the NCAA. It made it much different. I was, LMU was, the program was discontinued about a year and a half ago, I think, which is disappointing, but that's an aside. Is a West Coast Conference school. So LMU could win the West Coast Conference, and that would really still be the end of their season. There wasn't any postseason. There wasn't an NCAA championship for winning the WCC. And then that changed after I left college. The winner of, they kind of reformatted qualifying for NCAAs, and the winners of every conference that has enough qualifying schools goes to the NCAA championship. So they're really the motivation for programs to have collegiate lightweight rowing, or, for LMU to invest in lightweight rowing so that athletes could go to WIRA, qualify for IRAs. that really, the motivation really wasn't there, because it's really about, okay, how can we drive the open weight program and really kind of the open weight results to be at the point where we're winning the conference championship so that we're going to the NCAA championship, which is hard as a lightweight rower, but also I completely understand, right? If you told me, okay, Mary, this is what you need to do in order to get to the next level as a coach, I'd say, okay, yes, we want to get to that next level, and this is where we need to steer our program. So I can't speak for, like, I can't actually theorize on, I can theorize, I suppose, but can't speak for exactly why each program kind of went the direction that it did in terms of not having lightweight rowers. But I think that was certainly part of that evolution. So the kind of participation in lightweight rowing from those individual programs has definitely waned, and occasionally we'll have a program that enters the IRA National Championship that they don't have a dedicated lightweight program, but that's definitely a little bit different than it was about 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. So, but what has been really incredible is kind of the resurgence of the lightweight rowing in different ways. So with Boston University adding the program, so the program is about, not quite 15 years old at this point, about 13 years old. So that was, again, after I was in college. BU established lightweight women's rowing program separate from the open weight program. And that was really at the same time that they added men's lacrosse to their varsity program. So I think it's kind of well known that, we've got to be able to balance the number of male athletes and female athletes at a school, kind of proportionally to the number of male students and female students at the school. So we've got these Title IX compliance things, and that has really driven women's rowing forward. And then also now is having that impact on lightweight women's rowing as well. Because when you have a boathouse already and you have launches already, adding a rowing program to other existing rowing programs isn't quite the same leap as adding a rowing program when you have no boathouse and no launches and no boats. So I think that's something where, for Eastern Michigan and for Sacred Heart, there has been this opportunity of, okay, rowing is already here. How can we increase the number of people who are going to be able to participate in this sport? How can we invest in these female athletes and make it so that there are opportunities for them to compete at the national level? And that's what I think is just really exciting about that continued development, and that those athletes are now, the high school athletes that are in that lightweight range. It increases the number of opportunities that they have to compete in college. And certainly as a lightweight rower, there are opportunities on the open weight level, but it's different to be able to go to a lightweight school and compete at a national championship or compete for a national championship versus, kind of trying to fight your way through as a 128-pound athlete in a team full of athletes who are maybe 6 feet tall. There's a little bit of a difference there. And so having that opening and having these new programs develop is really exciting.
Yeah, and I think, and one of the things I've heard pretty consistently, just with the growth of rowing as a whole, is like when the infrastructure already exists, for an open weight program, or you have a men's program, and okay, well, you have launches, you have a boathouse. The barrier to entry in rowing as a whole is quite challenging because it requires a lot of expenses just to get up and running, boats, launches, so on and so forth. But when you already have those that exist, the infrastructure is already there, you can easily, hire a coaching staff, and now you have a program, right? You recruit some athletes. And I think that's hopefully a positive thing that you continue to see, with the growth of the lightweight rowing as a whole. So I want to now turn our attention. I could go a million different ways with my questions on this, but you're in it every day. You've been in it for a long time. Just the recruiting of lightweight rowers, but even just the existence of your team right now as you guys prepare for the spring rowing season. I want to start there, and then we'll talk about the recruiting side of things. But what does a successful lightweight rowing athlete look like in this?
Hold on.
No worries.
There we go. Yeah, I've been still for too long. Sorry.
There we go. No worries. Are you at the boathouse?
No, I'm in my office at the.
Gotcha.
I have an office on campus, so yeah.
Gotcha. Very cool. Well, what does lightweight rowing, like an athlete at that level, look like? Again, just I'm curious to hear because I think one of the things that is going to be very interesting for parents and athletes who are listening is like lightweight rowers are especially at the high level, right? The in the varsity eight and in the top boats and all these different things like are in many ways just as fast as a lot of the open weight cat like erg scores and all these different things. Like just what does a successful what are the characteristics of a successful lightweight rower at the Division 1 level?
Yeah.
Take that wherever you want because that's a very broad question.
Yeah.
But
I guess I have so many thoughts. As we talked about a little bit earlier, the weight is 130 pounds. And so I think that for high school athletes that are learning about lightweight rowing and considering lightweight rowing, my advice when I talk to athletes on the phone who are kind of like, I don't know that much about it. What do I need to know? What do I need to do? Um, I really just advise them to work hard and get fast and fuel their bodies and see where things go. So I think that it's really important to me that athletes aren't manipulating their weight when they're 15, 16 years old and starting to get established in the sport, because we would never want a swimmer or a soccer player or really anybody to be doing that when they're developing and growing. So I think that that's the way that I approach the very beginning of the process, especially, for us now, we can talk to student athletes after June 15th, after their sophomore year. So most of them are 16, and they may just be learning about lightweight rowing. And there's a lot of time, still a lot of time left in the recruiting process, a lot of time for them to get faster, a lot of time for them to grow during the course of their high school career, physically and mentally, of course. And so I think at that point when they're like, oh, what should I do this summer? What do I, how do I approach this process? What do I need to do in order to be a lightweight? And that's always my first advice is just be a rower. Be a rower and be a fast rower, be a skilled rower, move your way up in your team on your own merit, and see where your weight lands and see where your speed lands. And then as we go through that process, there are some athletes who say, oh, you know what, like this lightweight rowing isn't going to work for me because, I've now achieved this erg score, but I'm not in a lightweight range. I'm like, that's great. I'm excited when an athlete reaches that point because I say like, go be free, like find an open weight program that fits for you, and keep getting fast, because I think that's the most important thing is that they're able to just pursue speed. I love that. Like I love that. Um, I love that for myself. I love that for my athletes. And so that's really where I start with that. And then I think that, when I think about what makes a successful lightweight recruit, or like what we look for in lightweight recruits, is we're looking for athletes who are naturally around or under 130 pounds. Typically those athletes, I think, 5'1" would be really short. 5'2" is still pretty short for a rower just in terms of length, but there are definitely some very successful lightweight athletes who are around that height. And then, really body composition and the way an athlete grows has an impact. But, there are some lightweights who can be successful at 5'9", 5'10". That's starting to reach the point of like, okay, we want to make sure that you're fueling well and that being at a lightweight weight is not at a detriment to your speed or to your health. But again, it depends so much on genetics, really, is part of what it comes down to. So I'm 5'6", and that's something that I found a lot of those like 5'5" to 5'7" athletes, but then certainly there are outliers on either end who can be really successful as lightweight athletes. So I think that's again something that an athlete can't control their height, and there's some people that think that lightweight rowing should be based on height versus weight so that it can't be manipulated, which I think is an interesting theory. I don't know if anything would ever come of that, but that's something that is definitely a challenge for young women in high school to be, there are a lot of pressures from all sides. And I think that that's something that we consider to be a really important part of the process, is that those athletes are feeling like they're healthy and fueling and getting faster. And then if all of those stars align, then lightweight rowing can be a really great opportunity for them. So thinking about that recruitment process, we have our questionnaire online, and if someone fills out the questionnaire and really any erg score that's under 8 minutes, we say, okay, there's some potential here, right? Like if an athlete is a lightweight in high school and they're under 8 minutes, then it's really about where things go from there. So we don't typically recruit athletes who are right around the 8 minute mark for 2K, but if somebody is, again, at the end of their sophomore year, beginning of their junior year, and they're going 8 minutes, then they could be going 7:30 by the end of the year. So that's I think one of the exciting things about rowing recruiting. And I don't know much about how other sports recruit because it's so different, right? So soccer recruiting, I can't even imagine what that's like. But I think about swimming that I have experience in, and I think that it must be so different for those swim coaches because you're not seeing these leaps and bounds of improvement that you see from a high schooler who's rowing. So that's something that it adds to the challenge of the recruiting process, certainly, because I think a swim coach can see a time and say, okay, this athlete, if they haven't reached this time by the time they're 16, that's not like they're going to reach it when they're 20 and they're on my team. For us, an athlete can fill out our questionnaire and be going 9 minutes on their 2K and then could end up being a top recruit for us because of the way they develop, because rowing is a later in life sport. So, but it means that we have to pay attention to every person that fills out our questionnaire and every person that might have some potential to be on our team. Typically, we're looking when we're in the recruiting process. If we look at the numbers, then if we're seeing an athlete around 7:45, we're like, all right, like let's go. But then some of those athletes are also much faster than that, and then we also recruit athletes that are over 7:45, depending on their results and their boat moving and what their coach has to say about them and what we see on video and the conversations that we have with them. So the numbers are there, but then there's also so much more that goes into that.
I have to bridge off that because I'm so curious. And this is going to be one of my questions anyway. So it sounds like obviously, lightweight rowing and, we all know how, the size of the athlete can kind of impact, like how fast you can get to a certain erg score and all these different things. Like that's a reality, within our sport. And with lightweight rowing, kind of like that bridge that you were talking about, kind of getting into the 8 minute range, sub 8 minute range is kind of like a first barrier to entry to, maybe be able to engage in conversations and things like that. But then really like if you're getting on the other side of 7:45 as an athlete, like those conversations can probably start to get a little bit deeper and like, okay, now you're in that range that we're looking for. Paint the picture for me and for the audience. Like what does like top end speed look like at the lightweight level? And let's use the erg because it's easy, but not talking about like specifically your team and your athletes, but just in general, like how fast are these athletes going on the erg? How fast are these athletes going up for 2K, in that lightweight range? Because I think a lot of athletes will see it where it's like, I'm a lightweight and all I have to do is break 8 and I'm probably going to be, able to get, or I'm going to be able to talk to coaches and maybe be successful, or maybe get recruited. And my hope is that I'm going to be successful at the college level. But in reality, like that's just where your journey begins, because top end lightweights, at the level I'm sure within your boathouse are not at 7:45 necessarily when they're juniors and seniors, or maybe some of them are, but they're just really talented on the water or whatever it may be. Like paint a picture of like, what does that look like at the top end? Like what is the again, your time at Harvard and now at BU, like you've seen a lot of really gifted athletes, kind of come through, your lens throughout the years. Like paint that picture for people where they sense like, hey, I can get recruited, but the journey just begins once I step into the boathouse. Talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. If I start at the very fastest level. Lightweight women, so past college, rowing at national champion, not just national championships, world championships and the Olympics can be sub 7 minutes. So that's something that I think surprises people sometimes. But yeah, those top lightweight elite women are breaking 7 minutes, can be breaking 7 minutes. And then at the collegiate level, our team record at BU is sub 7:10, and I know that there are other athletes at other colleges, other lightweights that have gone sub 7:10. So that's fast. That's fast. And I eventually went that fast, but I did not go that fast in college. So I'm always impressed when I'm seeing athletes compete at that level and really be able to push to that speed. So that's something that's pretty incredible, and still impresses me every single day. And so that's that top level. And then many, like, really breaking 7:20 is a pretty big benchmark for top lightweight college athletes. I think most teams have a couple athletes at least that are around that 7:20 or sub 7:20 mark. So that's I think that when an athlete is, usually the very top athletes on a team are looking at those numbers and trying to achieve those numbers. I think that something else that is a challenge, I think sometimes, is when we 2K. How many do we do each year varies, and when we do them each year varies. But I think that the ability to PR in college is sometimes can be a challenge, especially I think freshmen sometimes you have freshmen that just take off, right? They're like, wow, their body just soaks up the training. Their mind is ready, and they just kind of can carve off a lot of time. Other times, I think that at the high school level, sometimes there are 2Ks. This happened. I hope I don't talk myself into a hole here, but something that happened, especially during COVID, is that a lot of those 2Ks got really fast because that's all anybody was doing. So instead of, everybody went through this really big winter training block thinking like, all right, we're working towards our regional championship, our national championship. And then in March, when everything got cut off, we had a lot of really fit, really fast athletes just like throwing down 2Ks. And so all of that fitness that was supposed to go into racing just went into numbers on the erg. And that's great. And I love that for the achievement and for the ability of those athletes to have continued to push during that time. But then we're not 2King always when we're at our fastest in college, right? We're trying to peak for a national championship that's happening at the end of May, beginning of June, and we're not 2King around that time. We're 2King in February, maybe in March. Sometimes throw a 2K in later in the season. But so I think that sometimes there can be and should be a ton of progress from those athletes as the training really takes hold and as they get faster. But there can, at least, immediately post COVID, there was a little bit of like, this is how fast I went. And I was like, oh my gosh, you were so fit. You were so ready. You were like race ready. And so there can be some mental blocks there that show up, but that's, I guess, a little bit of a tangent there. But I think that, athletes who come in and maybe, let's say an athlete is a 7:42 2K, they may not achieve that 2K on their first or their second 2K while they're in college training because they're more fatigued than they have been. They're adjusting to the schedule, they're adjusting to the training. But then really once their body is able to adapt to that training and they're really able to achieve that fitness, then, a January or February 2K can be a huge PR. So it depends on the athlete, depends on what their high school training was like too. How many, if they 2K'd every week in high school, that's a different scenario than if they 2K'd like twice and it was in, once in December, once in February. So that development, I think, is different for every single athlete. And can be challenging to see a teammate, chip off a ton of time and say, okay, I've hit my PR, but I haven't, made a ton of progress since then. And that's when we sit down with an athlete and we're like, okay, how are you sleeping? How are you fueling? How are you, do you have enough time between your class and your practice? Is there something that we can do as coaches in order to help adapt their training? Are there things that we can do that will enable them to be able to reach their peak speed? So you asked about numbers, and I'm talking about all the things that go into those numbers. But really, we see athletes who come in with 2Ks in the 740s who end up with 2Ks in the 720s or breaking 720. We can have athletes who come in and they're at a 740 2K, and then it takes them a while to then chip towards a 730 2K. So really those learning curves and those growth curves are definitely very varied across the athletes.
And so, like, it sounds like a lot of, and I love that. I love that breakdown. I think that's incredibly valuable for people to understand. Where it's like, hey, the top end, like, yeah, you may have an athlete who's under 710, like, and that's a top end college athlete. A good chunk might be in that kind of like 720 rank, like, below 720. I would say the majority, are like probably between like 720, 735. Is that maybe, or is it closer to like 720?
Yeah, I would say,
Yeah.
I would say like the bulk of our team is between 720 and 735. Yeah.
Yeah, which I think is, again, like, so valuable for high school athletes to learn, because I experience this a lot. And when I talk to guys on the men's side, where it's like, they want to row lightweight and they, whatever it may be, and they think like, oh, I gotta get into this range. Well, it's really like the speed is constantly going to evolve at that level. And just because breaking this threshold means you may get into conversations with some coaches, understand that, like, there's a whole another 4 years after that where the expectation is that you're hopefully going to see yourself progress and all these different things. And I think what's really helpful for athletes who are listening, for parents, for high school rowers who are listening, is like, it sounds like, hey, like, get into that 740 to 745 range, kind of like walking out of high school. And then when you're there, like, okay, well, the hope is that with our training, with our systems, you're going to be slowly making some progress and hopefully be in that 720 range maybe by the time you're in junior, senior year. Is that about kind of a
Yeah.
trajectory? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, that's something where, again, assessing an athlete's potential is huge for us as coaches because, again, it depends on what program they're part of. If they're part of a really big, kind of like bigger program that has a system to it, right? And we know there are a ton of athletes there. They're all pushing each other. That's very different than an athlete who maybe learned to row, with their parents and is a part of a 3 or 4 person club, and understanding how much faster that athlete can be is a big part of that recruiting process. So I think for us, yeah, really, when we get a questionnaire and that athlete's sub 8 minutes, then we'll send them an email and check in. And then when they're sub 750, we're like, all right, let's see where this goes, especially, the beginning, middle of junior year. And then it really does evolve as an athlete is, we have athletes that we love when we have athletes commit to us, and, we're going through the winter and spring of their senior year, and they'll text us or they'll email us and they're like, oh, I broke 735. I broke 730. Then that's exciting for us. We're like, yes, we kind of like found an athlete who's going to continue to get faster. So that's something that we definitely always are thinking, how can we make the athletes that are on our team faster? How can we search for athletes who are going to be getting faster? And again, part of that being their genetics and their physiology and their training, but also just their desire to continue getting faster. That it's not just, oh, I got through the recruiting process. I get to go to this school now, and I'm going to pause and just like kind of cruise through my senior year. But that pursuit of excellence and that pursuit of like, okay, I want to get faster because I want my team to be successful. I want to get faster because I love doing this. That's something that I really love and I find really important.
I love that. I love the transparency with like a lot of the just the numbers and all that too. I think that's incredibly valuable for people. And again, like I'm educating myself now where it's like, oh, like if you're in that sub 740 range and you're in high school, you're cooking. Like you're going to be on that trajectory that you're talking about. Or if you're below 735 or whatever, and but the ability to kind of getting your name into that 740s range is probably like the place to start. And then where do you go from there? I got a couple more questions for you and then we'll wrap up. I want to be conscious of your time, but bringing it back to one of the things I'm very curious to hear from you is, and again, lightweight rowing, obviously there's the weight standards that you're looking for athletes to be in that range. I'm curious to hear from you because I see this all the time on the men's side where if an athlete is, kind of in that, if they're under 175 pounds, they immediately think lightweight rowing is the only option that exists for me. And that's all I should be able to do. And in reality, I was a wrestler in high school. I know what cutting weight looks like. And I don't think it's necessarily the best, best path for a lot of people. And that's on the men's side, right? Where it's like, oh, I'm 170 and I should be, 160. And now you got to think about that's 4 years where you're going to be, dealing with having to be at weight, in an endurance sport and all these different things where you kind of have to be, like you said, fueled and optimized in order to perform at your highest level. I don't know if that exists necessarily as much on the women's side of rowing. I'd be curious to hear from you at a base level, whatever you want to kind of share. But like, what questions should athletes ask themselves, before diving down the path of feeling like lightweight rowing is the best option for me? Like if you're an athlete who is 135 and you're, 5'9" and, again, I'm just painting, just an example, but like,
Mm-hmm.
are these questions that athletes should be asking themselves? Where it's like, is that really the pursuit that I think is probably going to set me up for success for 4 years, and all these different things. I don't know if you experience athletes who have a massive growth spurt, like maybe you do on the men's side where, a lot of athletes are maturing in their first or second year. And then next thing you know, they grow out of the position a little bit. Like, what questions should athletes be asking themselves, in the recruiting process? What are you looking for, in the sense of, they might not be a lightweight, when, 3 or 4 years from now. And again, I want to be conscious of athletes and things like that, but like, is that present in the sport on the lightweight rowing side for women?
Yeah, so it's something that I spend a lot of time thinking about as in the recruiting process is whether or not an athlete is going to be an appropriate fit for lightweight rowing and for our program long term. So you give the example of an athlete who's 5'9", 135. That's something where if someone's 5'9", 135 and they're 22 years old and they're at the end of their college rowing career and we're thinking of continuing to row as a lightweight, that's a different conversation than an athlete who's 16 years old and 5'9" and 135. So for me, an athlete who is at those measurements is 5'9", 135. When they're 16 years old, I think, okay, they're 16 and we want them, there's 2.5 more years from the time they fill out that we can first have a conversation with an athlete after their sophomore year before they even show up on campus. So, okay, is this athlete going to be a lightweight athlete when they first come to campus? And then is this athlete going to be a lightweight during their 4 years as an athlete on our team? And so for me, a 5'9", 135 is definitely that's pushing the top end of my comfort zone for certain, and is an athlete that we would be proceeding with extreme caution, and maybe have a conversation. Like that's probably an athlete that we would be more likely to funnel over to our open weight coaches and have them have a conversation. And then, depending on their speed, honestly, that's where, if an athlete fills out our questionnaire and is, 8-minute 2K, 135, 5'9", then we're like, hi, thanks for filling out our questionnaire. Here are the standards for our team. Feel free to complete our open weight questionnaire. If an athlete is 135, 5'9", and going 730, then I'll probably soft intro them to our open weight coaches as that athlete has the potential to continue to get faster. But having been a lightweight myself in high school, in college, and then also at the international level, I am very conscious of the effort that goes into making weight and the impact on the bodies and the minds of athletes when they're having to make those choices. So I'm very much on the side of not wanting athletes to cut major weight, because it's not, we would never we would never want a swimmer to do that, right? I think I was really having a conversation with a friend who is a triathlete. I also do some triathlon myself, and she was like, I can't imagine. I was talking to her about lightweight rowing. She's like, I can't imagine trying to, in the week before this race, also have the added stress of managing my weight or managing my hydration in order to make weight. And really, once you're in the lightweight rowing world, it gets so easy to, or the wrestling world, as you mentioned, it gets so easy to normalize those things that really aren't normal. And then when you step outside of it and think like, oh my gosh, this triathlete or this marathon runner or this swimmer trying to manage those things is certainly going to impact their performance and impact their body and their mind, not just for that race or that competition, but on a long-term basis. So when we have an athlete who's 16 and seems like they maybe wouldn't be a lightweight, I think like, okay, what is life like for them when they're 20? What is life like for them when they're 22? And you mentioned men as well. And I think that's something that's also challenging because men's bodies and women's bodies are so different. And so the percentage of weight that a lightweight woman is, trying to lose in order to make weight is different than the percentage of the weight, of weight that a man is trying to lose, and the way that women, hold on to water slightly different. There's so many things that go into, that equation, that it's something that really I just try to avoid. Really try to look for athletes who are natural lightweights, and look for athletes who are going to be successful without having to manipulate their weight and without having to lose weight. Like I don't ever want to be in a position where I'm telling an athlete that they need to lose weight. So we have had athletes that are, we've had athletes on our team before in the past who it becomes no longer a good idea for them to be a lightweight rower. And at that point, we have a lot of serious conversations about what that means, and always making those decisions in the best interest of the athlete and in the best interest of the health of the athlete. And for some of them, open weight rowing is an opportunity that they choose to, that they're they're qualified for and choose to take. And then others go in a different direction and either kind of decide that rowing is something that they need to fully step away from, and that's hard. So that's why I really try to have that be something that we screen for in the recruiting process and have conversations with athletes about it. And we work with sports medicine here at BU closely in order to screen those athletes, and then also work with the athletes once they are on our team. So we have a full care team of nutritionists and physician and athletic trainer that are available to be able to work with the athletes, both before they're potentially on our team and then once they are on our team, in order to make sure that their health is really being taken care of. Because ultimately, like, rowing is great. I love rowing. I coach rowing, but the physical health and the mental health of the athletes is always, always, always the number one priority. And that's just something that I feel so strongly about.
I love that. I mean, again, just like the breakdown of it in the sense of, I think, again, I reference the on the men's side where it's like, hey, like guys who, are 170, like they immediately think like this is the only option. I think a lot of that's fueled by, you got to look at the schools that support lightweight rowing as well. Like, even on the women's side, Boston and Harvard Radcliffe and MIT and Stanford and Princeton, like these are incredibly in demand schools, right? Like BU, like in and of itself, like these are schools that people are dreaming about in their 4 years of high school. And in many ways, they're going to do whatever it takes to hopefully best position themselves where that could be a realistic avenue. And is that, going down one route but putting, yourself at at the expense of, your health, both physical and mental, like those are things that I think are very interesting. And I could talk about all day, like where it's just, I think it's a very realistic conversation because of the schools that do support lightweight rowing are schools that people love to be a part of. So again, I know I just rambled there, but any last thoughts on that piece? And then we'll slowly wrap up from there.
Yeah, I think something that I do in those recruiting calls is I find it hard to always step in fully into the recruiting position, right? And I often find that I do really try to advise the athletes who are wondering about it as much as I can, without unduly influencing them as someone who's, not shouldn't be a primary influencer in their life until I'm actually their coach. But that, like, Division III rowing is a really great opportunity for those athletes who are in that not quite lightweight range, right? It's going to be really hard for an athlete who is, let's say, 5'9", 145 going, 745, that those aren't numbers that are being recruited by the very top NCAA institutions. But that athlete can have so many other opportunities elsewhere, right? Whether that be at the Division III level, at the Division II level, at a Division I school that is trying to break their way into one of those automatic qualifier positions, right? So I definitely, in those conversations, don't always just recruit. I'm like, here are the opportunities that are available to you. Like, if you can't come from, like, you sound great and I want you to be successful and I want you to have a great rowing career and rowing opportunities, like, these are the other opportunities that are available to you. So I think that's something that is just core to how I feel about the sport, is that, like, there are opportunities for people to grow in different ways, right? And I tripped into some of the opportunities that I had, and I just want these athletes that are so passionate about rowing and are so devoted to getting faster and devoted to their teammates. Like, that's one of my, didn't talk a ton about recruiting conversations, but, like, when I talk to an athlete on the phone and they're just talking about how much they love their team, and how much they love going fast and how much they push each other, I'm like, oh yes, like, this is what it's all about. And so when I have a conversation with an athlete who may not be a fit for my team, but could be a fit for somewhere else and go, inspire other people elsewhere, I just really want that athlete to feel like they have that opportunity and have the ability to have the confidence really to reach out to other coaches, and have the confidence, like, just because you're almost a lightweight doesn't mean you can't be a successful open weight. And that's something that there's a place for so many different athletes at so many different programs across the country. And that it's not just, it's not black and white in terms of the lightweight, open weight, like, this is where my opportunity is and I can't do this. It's like, there's that ability to kind of find a place for everyone.
I love that, and I'm so happy I asked if you had any follow up, because I think one of the things is, like, again, it can be a hard conversation, but also understanding one of the beauties of women's rowing as a whole is there's so many opportunities that exist where, okay, this might not be the right fit for this particular athlete based off things that are completely outside their control, but there are amazing avenues that one could pursue, that could give you the academic, piece that you're looking for, but also give you the competitive outlet that you're looking for as well. And, understand that those are things that exist, but obviously we want, for someone like you, we want the top athletes who are able to be here and be successful for 4 years, and one less stressor, that they don't necessarily have to have weighing on them constantly, being the restrictions, with the 130-pound limit. So I think very interesting, I could ask questions all day, but I think let's wrap up with this. I think, where are we? All right. I want to be conscious of your time. Just closing things out. We've covered so many amazing topics today. And all these different things. Like, just last question for you. What advice would you give for an athlete who is brand new to row, not brand new to rowing, but brand new to the interest in wanting to one day pursue college rowing? We can take a little spin on this and make it, more about the lightweight opportunities that may exist. But just, what's a piece of advice that you would give to a high school athlete who's a sophomore and they're looking to better position themselves? And you've given tremendous, amazing advice all throughout the last hour. But like, if you had to pick one thing for an athlete who is a sophomore, junior, whatever, and they want to row one day at the Division I level on the lightweight side, what would be that piece of advice? Let's wrap up with that, and then we'll let you get on with your final week in Boston before you head down to Clemson.
Yeah, we've got some trailer loading to do. Oof. I think, it's so hard to pick out one piece of advice, and so hard to kind of capture this thought, but I think make sure you love it. Make sure that you love it, and it's not just, oh, this is a way for me to go to college, or this is what I should do. It's like, if you love rowing and you love being a part of a team and you love working hard and want to be a part of a community like that, like that's what should drive those decisions. And finding that community on official visits or unofficial visits, and but just knowing that it's really hard work, and so you have to love it. It can't be something that you've forced yourself to do or that your parents have guided you to do. It has to be something that you love, and you can hate it on some days. There are days when it's not going to be what you love, but it has to be like that. That's what has to drive both the recruiting process and then the training and the racing, and everything beyond that is just like, make sure that you love it. And if you don't, how can you make it be different, right? Is it about the time commitment? Is it about the numbers? Are there things that you can change so that you do love it, or figure out like, how do you want to do this in college, right? If you kind of love it, can you dabble in club rowing, which is really excellent opportunity for so many athletes. But just like, let that passion drive you, I think, is my biggest piece of advice.
I love it. Mary, this was a blast. And you provided an entire hour's worth of education on the history and what's happening in the boathouse of a elite lightweight program, and also how aspiring college rowers can be able to position themselves to be there one day, rowing under someone like you or your peers. Like, again, this is exactly what I was hoping for, to provide me the insight. And I'm sure if you answered a lot of my questions, you answered a lot of other people's questions who are tuning in up to this point. So, Mary, thank you so much for coming on. Good luck as you guys prepare to head down to your spring trip in Clemson, and then obviously, jumping right into a little hometown rivalry on the Charles with BC. So I'm excited to tune in. I'm excited to follow the team. But again, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for answering some pretty challenging questions. This was a blast, and I definitely want to do a round two at some point. And I'll be up in Boston, on a yearly basis. So I will definitely be in touch. Hopefully come up there, sometime around the Charles or something like that. And hopefully, if allowed, grab a seat in a launch or something like that. Yeah. See what's cooking.
Definitely right along.
Yeah. Thank you again. Thank you so much for coming on, and really appreciate it. And safe travels down to Clemson for your guys' trip.